Welcome students. I hope you all are doing good. In this presentation, I am going to teach you Lesson 8, The Dying Detective. Let's read a popular story from the Sherlock Holmes stories. Dear students, before getting into the explanation, let me talk about the author. This story was written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. He was a Scottish doctor who inherited the love for writing works from his mother. His first story was published when he was 20. He is best known for his Sherlock Holmes stories. He modeled the character of Sherlock Holmes on his former professor. Apart from short stories and novels on crime, he wrote historical novels, romances, and plays. He created the character Holmes in 1811, A Study in Scarlet, the first of his 4 novels, and 56 short stories about Holmes and Dr. Watson. The Sherlock Holmes stories are generally considered milestones in the field of the crime fiction. So my dear students, I hope you all must have understood the concept behind the story. Let me introduce the story. In the story, the Dr. Watson becomes convinced that his friend, the brilliant consulting detective Sherlock Holmes, is dying from a highly contagious disease, which is usually found only in Asia. But Holmes refuses to allow Watson to examine him. Instead, Holmes tells Watson to bring a man called Culverton Smith to see him. He has no professional medical training, but he knows more about the disease which Holmes claims to be suffering from than anyone else in the world. Holmes admits that he and Culverton Smith are not on friendly terms because Holmes suspected that the man had some part in the death of his nephew. So students, this is a little introduction about the story, but you might be wondering how the story is like, right? But the title which tells you about the dying detective, the author was trying to put into Sherlock to introduction also, it has been told to you that the Sherlock Holmes was suffering from certain illness. So let's begin with the explanation of the chapter. So here in front of you, it's the beginning of the chapter. So before getting into it, let us understand who is and who was Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes is known for his sharp logical reasonings and his ability to disguise himself. Most Sherlock Holmes stories are set in London and narrated by Holmes' friend Dr. John Watson. So let's read one such story which was narrated by Watson. And Sherlock Holmes was a character which has been famous for his investigative skills, right? And his ability to judge with his very own reasoning skills. So let's begin. He is dying, Dr. Watson, said Sherlock Holmes' landlady. He would not let me get a doctor. So here in this sentence, the landlady who was taking care of Sherlock Holmes, she was saying to Dr. Watson that he is going to die. And with that, the landlady again telling him that he was not letting her to get a doctor. With your leave or without it, Mr. Holmes, I am going for a doctor, said I. Now, Dr. Watson said to Sherlock Holmes that with your permission or without your permission, I am going to get a doctor. I was horrified, I can tell you, Dr. Watson. He has been working on a case in an alley near the river and he has brought this illness back with him. Neither food nor drink has passed his lips ever since. So here in this paragraph, the landlady who was totally horrified with his situation, so she was telling that Dr. Watson she was telling to Dr. Watson that Sherlock Holmes was working on a case which is in Ellie. Ellie means it's a strip of land which is near the river, and he himself brought the inlays back with him. And with that, neither food nor drink has passed his lips ever since. That means that he didn't had anything, nor neither the food nor the water. Holmes was indeed a sad spectacle. His eyes had the brightness of fever, his voice was croaking. Dr. Watson was very sad to see Sherlock Holmes in that manner. His eyes was full of brightness with fever and his voice was also very croaking. My dear fellow, I cried, approaching him. And Dr. Watson approached Sherlock Holmes and he was very sad to see him in this situation. Stand back, right, he ordered sharply. But why? And suddenly, when Dr. Watson approached Sherlock Holmes, he told him to stand right back and he ordered him very sharply. But Dr. Watson was very amazed why he was saying to him in that manner. Because it is my desire. Is that not enough? It's for your own sake, Watson, he crowed. Now again, Sherlock Holmes tried to explain him that you should not come to me and that is for your own sake. He again and again told him to stay back. For my sake, I know what the matter with me is. It is a disease from Sumatra, a thing we know little about. One thing is certain, it is deadly and it is horribly contagious. As Sherlock Holmes was trying to tell Dr. Watson to stay back as it is for his own sake, as whatever the matter is with the Sherlock Holmes is that the illness that he is suffering from, it's a disease which is from Sumatra. It's an island in Southeast Asia. This is a disease which nobody knows about. And that one thing is very certain, that means the one thing is very sure is that it is very deadly and horribly contagious. That means it is very much communicable to each other. Holmes said, You are not yourself. A sick man is like a child, and so I will treat you. Dr. Watson, being on a friendly manner because he is a very good friend of Sherlock Holmes, he was trying to convince him that you are ill and the ill person is like a child and I am going to treat you like that only. You mean well, Watson, groaned the sick man, but shall I demonstrate your ignorance? What do you know of Tapanuli fever or of the Black Formosa corruption? I have never heard of either. Now, in these two paragraphs, Sherlock Holmes was trying to explain Dr. Watson that don't try to ignore this situation. What do you know about the other diseases? Which these diseases is not being heard by Dr. Watson. So he was totally unknown about these sort of diseases. There are many strange diseases in the East, Watson. You can do nothing. So here, Sherlock Holmes was trying to explain Dr. Watson about the disease which he never heard of. And there are things which can not be done by anything or anyone. Possibly not, I replied. But Dr. Anstree, who is the greatest living authority on tropical disease, is now in London. I am going this instant to fetch him. Now Dr. Watson has replied to him that might be I don't know about these diseases, but there is one person by the name Dr. Anstree. He was a great living doctor who has a great knowledge of these tropical diseases. And that person, that doctor, is in London now. And he was explaining to Sherlock Holmes that I am going to ask him for your appointment. Never had I had such a shock. In an instant, leaping up like a tiger, the dying man had interrupted me. I heard the sharp snap of a twisted key. Then suddenly, what happens? Dr. Watson was very shocked. In an instant, the sick man, that means Sherlock Holmes, was leaped up like a tiger, and that the person who is dying, he interrupted him with the sharp snap of a twisted key. The next moment he had staggered back to his bed, completely exhausted. You won't take the key from me by force, Watson. Here you are, and here you will stay unless I wish otherwise. It is 4 o'clock. At 6 you can go. So suddenly, the next moment, he get back to the bed and he was totally exhausted. And he was saying to Dr. Watson that you should not take a key from me with the force. If you are here, so have to stay here. Otherwise, it's your wish. Now he was telling him that right now it's 4 o'clock and at 6 you can go. I seem to have no choice. Not at all now. Watson, there is one other condition I would make. You will seek help not from the man you mentioned, but from the one I choose. Now Dr. Watson knows that he doesn't have any choice left with him. So he told him now what to do. So Sherlock Holmes put up one condition, that he had to choose one thing. He had only one choice, that he had to take a help, but from not the person he had mentioned, but the person he is going to choose from. By all means, at 6, Watson, we resume our conversation. So he was saying that at 6 we will resume our conversation. That means whatever he wanted to convey to him about that person. So my dear students, here I am going to conclude part 1 of lesson 8, Dying Detective. The other remaining part will be discussed in the other parts of the chapter that will be uploaded soon. Thank you.